How's it going, guys? Joe here. Tonight we're gonna wrap up the bookmark retriever series, so let's just jump right in. So if you need a little bit of context, I made this program that can allow me to retrieve media player classic bookmarks on the Mac. I'm not gonna go through what all that entails because I already have two videos that do that, and I'm basically gonna be bringing that to a conclusion tonight. So let's just jump right into it. So I've already kind of figured out exactly what needs to get changed and whatnot, but I'm going to walk you through all those changes so that I can show you what I changed to bring it to the final product. I'll show you what it is in the first place. So first of all, my bookmark retriever looks a bit like this. So I have, obviously, this is a bookmark that's stored in a file that I've exported through Media Player Classic. Watch the other videos for more information on that. But I can retrieve a screenshot, the time code, and the title. I can copy the title if I want, and also go from one to the next. So that's possible as well. And then I also had the screenshots tab, but I ran into all these different issues. Like if this wasn't currently doing stuff, then we would see stuff right here. The settings works perfectly fine. So I tried to fix that problem of the screenshots not working at the same time as the main program, but I've decided at this point I'm actually better off splitting it into two separate programs, which you may or may not have been able to tell from the tabs right here. But I've decided that since they do work, just not both at the same time, it makes a lot of sense for me to split it into two separate programs. So I'm going to show you how I ended up doing that. So based on these tabs right here, you can tell that I have one for Media Player Classic bookmarks and one for screenshots. As of right now, this is the original code for both of them. I'm going to port it into two separate programs. So effectively what I'm doing is the Media Player Classic Retriever is only going to have the Bookmarks tab as well as settings. The Screenshot Retriever will only have screenshots and settings. So I'm basically splitting it from one program into two, since they do work on an individual basis. It's just a much easier option, and I don't have to spend nearly as much time trying to fix everything. I did spend a little bit of time trying to fix stuff, but I did not get very far with that, so I'm not going to waste any more time on that. So let's get it split into two applications now. We'll start with the bookmark retriever right here. So I already did this, but I want to do it again so you can see exactly what changes I made, what errors I've run into, and how I went about solving that. So like I said, these are both the same as of right now, but I'm going to change them. So the first thing I want to do in the bookmarks one is, of course, remove the tab for screenshots. The first part we have for that is right there. So I'm just going to delete those two lines. So now it's just bookmarks and settings. And then in the update GUI function, screen being 0 was basically the bookmarks tab, and screen being 1 is the screenshots tab. So effectively what I want to do here is get rid of that if statement right there, and then also this one, and then indent everything so that it's like that. So in theory, that's what I want for the update GUI. I'm going to leave the screen stuff in there. If it works at this point, that's really all I care about. So now down here, we also have a declaration where we create the screenshots frame. I want to get rid of that too. So you'll notice that there's different functions for saving each type of path. So since we're not doing the screenshots one for this one, I'm just going to get rid of that function right there. So now we just have save bookmarks path. Let's do a real quick test to make sure that everything still works. So this is for our Media Player Classic one. we are now running into some errors, which I don't know why that's happening, but we'll take a look and see what's happening. I have a function that's not defined somewhere. So this is in button 6, which I'm about to get rid of. So we gotta get rid of some more stuff that no longer exists. First thing is entry 3. So I'm just gonna search entry 3, since that's pretty much irrelevant now. So if you need a reference on what entry 3 is, it's something that's in that settings screen. It's the path for the screenshots. The path for the bookmarks is right here, so we can leave that. But we want to get rid of entry 3 right there. And right there too. And then button 6 is also irrelevant, so we can get rid of that too. That's in the settings page also. So we have that entry, and then I'll pull it up and show you what I'm talking about. Now everything looks a lot more normal, as you can see. So we used to have 2 text boxes and save buttons. Now there's just one. What we got rid of was the text box and the save button that correlates with screenshots. So now it's this standalone thing right here. So that's good. So pretty much everything still works at this point. I should be able to paste the time code, which I could do right there. I should be able to say copy title. I want to do the title instead. Save would still work, I imagine. So if I hit 6 right there, hit save, then reboot it. We should... Oh, I did not save correctly. Now I remember why. So we hard-coded this very specific file right here. But now we have the path stored in this settings.txt file. So what we actually want to do is, if you remember, we read from that settings file right here. And we have paths index 0 for the first index. Path index 1 is that path right there. So since path index 0 is a path that we actually want, we can now change this very specific path to just be path index 0. Like that. So now it should read that. We don't have anything else that's specific, so that should fix our saving problem. It wasn't saving correctly because it was going to the wrong file. Now if I say 6 right there, hit save, and relaunch it. Now it wrote the changes correctly. So it was actually reading from the correct file, but it wasn't saving to the correct file until we made that change. So now we got that fixed. So at this point, everything should work as expected for the bookmark retriever part of it, including the settings, I would imagine. But now what I want to change is the macros. So I can press Shift Enter to go to the next index. And then Control Enter is how I do my macro. But what I want to do is make it so Control Enter goes backwards, and then Control Shift Enter does macro. So basically Shift Enter goes to the right, because that's what this does right here. So what I actually want to do is change this to control return, and then this becomes backwards, so I'll create a function called backward. So forward is right there, so I'll just duplicate that, and then we'll come to here. This will be backward, and the only difference is that's now minus equals 1, and that should be what we're looking for. So now the control, actually this is supposed to be control return. And then this should be control shift return for the macro. So now the macro will work if I press control shift return. Control return will go backwards. I will prove it now. So shift return will go forward. Control return goes backwards, which is exactly what I want. I don't have my environment set up to test out the macro, but just take my word for it that it works when I do it like this. I think I might try something like this during the series, but it didn't work probably because I had control like that. And I didn't piece together at 5 in the morning that I can do it like this. But that does work. So as far as I'm concerned, the bookmark retriever is now ported into its own program. Everything should work functionally. I'm sure there's some code I might want to change, like the update GUI with 0. I may not want this now, but I don't care. Since it works, I'm just going to leave it. In my case, since I'm the one using the program, it's fine. And if anybody else wants to use it on GitHub, well, they can submit a pull request of the optimizations that should be made. Otherwise, this is the final version of that. Now let's mess with the screenshot retriever. So it's going to be pretty similar in some aspects, but there's quite a few that we're going to have to tweak and fix. So now we're going to get rid of the bookmarks frame part, and then an update GUI. Now we no longer want this part of the if statement to happen. We want this bottom part to happen right here. So let's delete those lines and that if statement, shift everything over like that. We can also get rid of that not happening right there. So I think that should be correct. I can't remember if it is or if I have to take some stuff from that previous statement. I might not. We'll wait and see though. So then of course I'm going to remove bookmarks frame from right here. And like before, we had a save screenshots path is what we want to keep, so this is what we want to get rid of. Now instead of removing entry 3, we want to remove entry 2. So let's get rid of that and that. So now we're just left with entry 3, which is what we want. We don't need to change it to 2 or anything. It should still be the correct thing. And since the row is relative, we shouldn't have to change this at all, but we could if we really wanted to. We're also going to get rid of button 5, so let's just delete that. Then if you remember from before, we had a line that said column configured. This is now irrelevant as well. If I run it, we'll get an error on this because bookmarks frame no longer exists, so we can just get rid of that. Now let's run the screenshot retriever one. Bookmarks frame is not defined on line 18 or 186, sorry. So if we go to 186, this is no longer bookmarks frame. It is now screenshots frame. I'm just going to copy that screenshots frame. We'll go back to 186. And then we'll paste that there. But realistically speaking, anywhere we have bookmarks frame, it should now be screenshots frame. So let's do a find and replace with bookmarks frame and change it to screenshots frame. That's what it should be, realistically speaking. So let's try that. So now the screenshot is taking up basically the entire screen, and it's probably cropping some of it off. This is the kind of screenshot for what I'm doing nowadays. But now it's reading a screenshot because I split it into a separate application. The mechanism we had works, it's just, yeah. So now let's figure out how to resize it. So I'm going to actually resize the image in a similar way to what we used to do, except now that I no longer have this code for resizing it, this is actually not the mechanism we want to use right here. Instead, we want to look at where we first create the image, which is right here, this load image. That's what we want to resize before we do anything else. So we can say load equals load.resize, and then we're gonna give it two arguments. One of them is the size, which just like before we did 800 by 450, I think. Yeah, we'll have that be the same because the application, I'm just gonna have that be the same size as what I did before. And then it won't work unless we also specify what resampling mode we're using. So the one I ended up going with, which is saying resample equals image.resampling dot bilinear. I believe that's what I ended up using. So that should resize our image now. So let's see if it worked. So that is a screenshot retriever. So there we go. Now that the image is smaller, all of our elements are fitting on the screen. But if you remember correctly, the time code, title, copy title, those are irrelevant now. I take that back. Title might actually be relevant if I want to see the name of the image file for some reason. That would probably be better than counting the number of files to trace exactly which image it is in my screenshots directory. So we can get rid of those. So let's search for time code. That variable right there. So that is pretty much irrelevant at this point, as well as title. So we can get rid of those two variables. Let's see if we have any other instances of time code and title. We can get rid of them. And those. And those. We can get rid of time code and title right here. So no more instances of time code. That should be our only instance of title, so we can leave that. We also want to get rid of button 4. The copy title one, so that's our only instance of that, so we're good there. And we got rid of all instances of bookmarks frame, so we're good as far as that goes. So let's see what we're left with now. Yeah, that pretty much looks like what we want. But now you'll see that it kind of looks a little bit ugly with this line on the bottom being all the way up here instead of down here. So the workaround that I did was, if you remember, we created this label to act as sort of a spacer. Without that label, we end up with absolutely no space right there. So we do want that. But to create more space, we can create more labels that are blank in the corresponding rows. So I believe what I did was I created all the way up to 11. So I think that means I need 5 more of them. So then I can just change that to all the way up to 11. And then let's try that one. So I think that's should give us enough spacing for the rest of it. There we go. So it's about even with the top now. I know it's kind of weird. There's a little bit of white space there, but I don't really care. It works pretty much like I want it to now. So we go to this settings page. It's got the correct path, and there's not too many of these. So we're set as far as that goes too. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you'll remember that our paths variable, like our paths right here, this is path index 0, which is not what we're after for the screenshot one. We're after path index 1. So there might still be some paths index 0. So we're going to want to search for paths index 0. We got one of them yet. That needs to get changed to paths index 1. So we'll do a find and replace on that. Sorry, you probably can't see when I hit replace all. Just know that if I click a button behind my overlay, that's a replace all. Now everything is paths index 1, which is what we want here, instead of 0. So that's perfect now. Now one other problem we have is, if you notice, yeah, so now we're gonna run into this error right here. And that's because if you look at our paths right here, I'm referring to a text file over here, which makes perfect sense. And here I'm referring to a directory, which also makes sense because the Media Player Classic bookmarks come from a text file, but the screenshots come from a directory. So how do we go about dealing with that? Do we change our reference to a text file? That's not what I would do because it just adds a whole layer of complexity to it. So what I've done is I've created a text file for this, which is stored directly in here, which has a frame rate and an index. I'm really only using the index variable that's highlighted right here. I only put a frame rate there just to keep everything uniform because I don't actually need it, since, you know, the screenshots are screenshots doesn't matter what the frame rate is. So I'll just put 30 since I think that's what the original videos are. And we want to reference this file, and we can't really do that because we have a directory here. So what I would recommend doing is, where we open up this paths index 1, we want to open up the text file rather than the root directory of it. So to fix it, I think we could just go like this and append the text file after the original path. I think that's going to be by far easier. I really shouldn't be hard-coding a specific file like Gilligan's Island, but I'm still going to go with it since it's by far the easiest option that I know of. So we can change it right there, and then paths index 1. We don't need to change it here because it's scanning through the actual directory. So we're set right there. Since we're also referencing it in save index, this is the other place. So we gotta obviously change this as well. So to do that, we can say paths index 1, but that's where we want the text file as well. So we'll just append that text file to the end right there. So now we should have an index that's separate from this one right here. And that should be all we need to do to make that work. So now it's referencing 0 by default, which, is that really 0? Something doesn't seem right there. Considering that's not black and white like I would expect it to be. That is, so maybe it's working. I should be able to enter like 683. Hit save. And then reload it, and it should do the correct index, which it is. So now we have the index saving properly. So at this point, all we need to worry about are the keyboard shortcut bindings, which is pretty much exactly the same as the previous. So we got forward right there. Actually, let's duplicate this one because it is control return. And then this is backward. This is control shift return for macro. So let's go to the forward function. And then change that to backward right there, and then it's minus equals 1. So now our shortcuts should be correct too. Now if I hit Shift Enter, the screenshots load a lot faster because it's not extracting a frame from a video. It is directly extracting a screenshot. Now Control Enter will go like this, which is perfect. So yeah, I think we've now split it into 2 separate programs, and it should work as you would expect. So that's how I made the changes that I did. So now all we really need to do is technically get rid of the print statements at this point. So I think I'm just gonna look for print and then add a comment before it. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. So now we don't have any more print statements, so that is it. We now have it split into 2 separate applications. So I think that's really all we need to do. Now, one thing I will real quickly note is with the Media Player Classic Retriever, the frame that I end up extracting might not actually be exactly the same as where it really is in the video. And that could be because the frame rate I specify in the file might not be exactly 59.94. It might be more like 59.939916. But whatever. There could also be a variable frame rate versus a constant frame rate, so that could throw off which frame ends up getting extracted as well. The time code will probably match because that's not dependent on whether it's variable or constant frame rate, but the frame itself does depend on that. So that's why I think the frame might be off. For now, I think I'm just going to deal with it because it's only a couple seconds off, and it gives me the overall gist of what I'm looking at, especially for a moment in a show. But I could either deal with it or else maybe figure out a way to read the actual frame rate or some other technique. But for now, I think I'm just going to deal with that inaccuracy. So, otherwise, I believe that is it. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to let me know. I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, yeah, I think that's it. So, thanks for watching and have a good one. That is the end of the series for real, I think. I might leave a comment update if there's any updates, like if I figure out the frame rate and accuracy stuff. Otherwise, yeah, that's it. So thanks for watching. Have a good one. Peace.